Welcome to OnSoftware. Conversations with thought leaders in software development.
One concern I've had, right, and I shouldn't say I've had it, I've heard this from other people that I talk to about this. You know, say what you will about Sun, you know, they don't remove deprecated methods, and methods that were deprecated back in 1.0 are still with us today.
Right. And I hate that, but there are plenty of people, I'm sure, who think that's exactly the right approach.
The general concern is I know that the Ruby and particularly Rails communities have this reputation of, whether it's deserved or not, have this reputation of, oh, you know what, we feel like we're changing the APIs today, so you're screwed.
Yep.
Right? There's not that sense of, I don't know if discipline is the right word, or rigor, or commitment to
responsibility.
Yeah. Is that just an outsider's perspective, or?
I think it is. There are going to be a lot of people around in the Ruby community supporting Rails 1.1 applications for a very long time. And there's a lot of care taken to keep the language compatible. Ruby sort of has adopted the Perl, or I guess it came from Linux, the version numbering convention of even numbered releases are stable and odd numbered releases are where the experimentation and possibly incompatible things happen.
Okay, so 1.9 that was just released is considered experimental, not stable?
It is the development version for what will become 2.0.
Okay.
Which is, I don't know if Linus is still doing that, but that was the way he did the Linux
2.2,
version.
2.4,
Right.
2.6, etc.
There are people working with that, and I'm sure there are people running that in production. I wouldn't.
Right.
But, there's a tension between making changes that need to be made, some of which might be incompatible, and keeping things stable. It's an open source project, and the 1.8.6 code and the Rails 1.1 code will be there for people to maintain for a long, long time, and I think that'll work out just fine.
Now, one of the principal criticisms, which you've alluded to already, is that Ruby, being a dynamic language, being interpreted, being whatever you want to call it, lacks the safety, lacks the compiler checking that we get in Java and C# and C++ and so forth. And therefore, unless you are a very disciplined programmer, unless you have a real commitment to unit tests, you're really playing with fire. And this has always been the principal criticism of dynamic languages. Couple with that, the Ruby facilities for meta-object programming, method missing, and so forth, which granted give you a tremendous amount of power, but people particularly coming from the Java world get this image of Ruby guys just sort of carefree juggling chainsaws, and if a few body parts go missing, well, you just weren't smart enough to use this environment, go back to Java.
I used to think there was something to that.
Yeah.
And I, even as a Ruby aficionado, I held back from pushing it into certain environments and recommending it in certain situations. But I've seen so many Java projects screwed up beyond all imagining, both in terms of robustness and in terms of design and architecture and maintainability, and the robustness issues in Java applications aren't because of class cast exceptions. They're because of other kinds of bugs, and the not being disciplined about unit testing will bite you no matter what language you're in. And since I've been doing Ruby full time, I've worked with teams of great programmers and teams of kind of average programmers without as much experience, and they take to it like a duck to water. And I think, I can't prove it, it's anecdotal, but from what I've seen, Ruby helps you become a better programmer. It's not a magic pill or anything, but and I don't really have an explanation for why that is. But I had a conversation with a friend that I used to work with, where he voiced very similar worries about using Ruby in their organization, and I said, and I had worked with him for a few years, and I said, okay, just think with me about the Java projects we've seen and been brought into and done architectural reviews of. Could they possibly have been screwed up any worse with Ruby? And he said, well, no. And I was about to say, that's my point. And he said, but with Ruby, they would mess up faster. And I sat there and waited for the words to wrap around and go back in his ear. And sure enough, he said, oh, that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? So
in other words, it's not about failure, it's about failing more quickly.
Well, rapid feedback is a good thing, whether it's feedback that you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And in several ways, dynamic languages tend to facilitate rapid feedback. And of course, over and over again, people, either anecdotally or through formal studies, have really pointed to the fact that the key thing that makes the difference between project success and project failure is the quality of your team. It's not tools, it's not process, it's not how you gather requirements, it's not any of those other things. Statistically speaking, those are all down in the noise in terms of how much of an effect they have on project failure or success. It's the quality of your team.
And that raises, sort of the final question, which is to say, right now, we can look at the Ruby community, we can look at the Java community, and just by sheer dint of numbers, by sheer measurement of
I know where you're going with
who
this.
has come. I mean, because we've had this conversation before. Are we in a position right now where the reason why Ruby is so successful is because all of the early adopters, the technical alpha males, are in Ruby and are good programmers, and so therefore they're succeeding with Ruby? And when, if, whatever, Ruby suddenly becomes the mainstream success that Java is and was, and .NET is and was, suddenly we're going to have, all those VB programmers writing Ruby. Yeah, I mean, I could see the fear in your eyes.
There's something to that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's all of why Ruby looks so good right now, but undeniably, the people who are doing Ruby right now are primarily the early adopters, the people who like to be on the cutting edge, the people who really care about being good programmers and using the sharpest tools possible, and all of those things. And so we're kind of, in the Ruby community, top heavy with great programmers.
Right.
And that's good for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not a bad place to be if you're in that pool.
It is. It will change somewhat.
Right.
And right now, there's more Ruby and Rails work out there than there are good people to do it.
Right.
And so very soon, you're going to start hearing the failure stories of people who tried to do it without sufficient training, without a good guide, without the right team.
The rigor of unit tests as a culture.
And but those projects happen. Those kinds of failures happen with every language. As big a fan as I am of Ruby and dynamic languages, I don't think that any language or tool or platform is going to really raise the level of our industry. What I hope happens is that we start paying attention to really cultivating and training good programmers, and really as an industry understanding the importance of being responsible about what we do and really taking pride and care in it. I think Ruby facilitates that, makes that easier. In some ways it highlights the need for that kind of thing. And certainly the community, the Ruby community, are all very strong believers in it, and it's a welcoming place for people who want to be really good software developers. But ultimately, it has to be good programmers doing the work.
Okay. Glenn, I want to thank you for joining us and
Thank you, Ted.
Spending a little time with us and talking about Ruby, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
My pleasure.
For more information, visit onpodcastweekly.com and subscribe to all our podcasts. Brought to you by the publishing imprints and information portal of Pearson Education.